So no, I've been in those situations, Aaron. Like, so when I was at the Freedom Forum in Oslo, what a name, huh? Right out of Orwell. So I was at the Freedom Forum, and the Freedom Forum, they have it every year, and the Young Turks would send somebody to the Freedom Forum to cover it. And what they do is they put you up in a nice hotel, and they give you nice meals, and they give you a leather handbag, and they take you out on a cruise to look at the fjords, and and they basically butter you up so you give positive coverage to their, what it actually is they pretend to be standing up for civil rights and people who are pushing back against dictatorships, but they're only propping up people in the countries they want to overthrow, right? Like Iran, right? Or people from China, right? Or people from Russia, stuff like that. They wouldn't have anybody. And so I saw what the opening ceremony, I sniffed this out, and there was that Garry Kasparov, right, the chess champion. He's the big Putin hater, and so I stood up and I said, "Hey, you guys don't talk about the United States. You guys are talking about all these countries. The United States is the one that set the Middle East on fire. We're the ones who did Libya. We did Iraq. We're trying to do Iran. We did Afghanistan for 20 years, and they just started. She called me, 'You are Putin's body. You are Putin's body.'"
You're his body?
Body. And I was standing in a room full of journalists, and I was the only one saying those things, and I got shouted down, and
not one journalist reported it,
and not one journalist even reported on it. Not one journalist. And I talked about how the United States is the world's largest. He's talking about how the United States is a democracy and you have a chance to vote your people. And I said, we're the world's largest penal colony. They kill shoot people on the streets with impunity, and we live in a police state, and we live in a surveillance state, and we have more people in prison here than they have in China. What are you talking about? You got Putin's body, and not one of those journalists reported it. Well, that's why the Young Turks, they would send someone there, and I couldn't believe that because they had sent someone there before and come back, and I'm like Johnny Iderola had gone there. I'm like, you didn't fucking see. So he just went along with it. Johnny Iderola was just a garbage journalist when he went there. And
Shocking.
Shocking, right? Of course, he's a go-along. He'll never do anything against the establishment. And certainly...
Do you want to maintain a relationship with power or not?
And that's exactly what it was. So he took their, all their gifts, and he got bribed, and he didn't say anything. And so
Johnny who?
His name is Johnny Iderola. He works for
Ida or Ida?
Ida.
Oh.
And we used to call him Johnny Pie. And so, of course, he went along with that. And I went there the next year, and I knew it was this giant scam. It was a giant scam. And the first day of the thing, who was the guy who runs that thing? I forget his name. Anyway.
Oh, that guy.
Anyway, so, but it was him and Garry Kasparov.
Thor Halvorson?
Thor Halvorson.
Nice pull.
Have you ever heard that name, Aaron?
Yeah, Thor, of course. He's related to some Venezuelan coup mongers, people who tried to overthrow the government. I mean, you can tell by the name Thor.
Yeah.
Like, does Thor sound like a common Venezuelan name, or is he possibly linked to like the light-skinned elite that's always
sounds like a paperclip name to me?
So he invented a organization called like Human Rights Association or something.
That's great.
They always hide behind human rights. What they are is regime change actors, and they do it under the guise of human rights.
That was the Cecil Rhodes School put that together. They said we're going to use human rights to overthrow countries.
And that's exactly
what Milner Kindergarten. That's part of that thing. Yeah.
And I sniffed it out like in a second. And of course, the Young Turks reporter Johnny Iderola I'm sure he saw what was happening, but just didn't care because that would cause problems for him, and it would be uncomfortable.
What about your career?
That would be, he was thinking about his career.
Be a slave forever.
So I go and I do that report, and I expose what that is. You can keep Aaron on the screen, and I expose what that thing is actually for. And I put that video up on the Young Turks channel, and the Young Turks changed the title of it. They changed the title of it to Jimmy Dore Ruins the Oslo Freedom Forum. That's what I swear to God, that's what they did. Isn't that what they did,
Yeah,
Steph?
they did, Jim.
And I wouldn't have known about it, except I went back I wanted to go get a piece of tape from that video. And when I couldn't find it, and then I finally found it, and I found out that an executive at the Young Turks had done that because he didn't want to wreck the relationship with the people at the Freedom Forum, because they were going to send Johnny Iderola back the next year, just like they sent Anna Kasparian to those weapons symposiums at the Munich, whatever, what the fuck that thing was called.
Madeleine Albright.
And where she gives a tongue bath to Madeleine Albright, saying it's a great honor to meet someone who bragged about genociding 500,000 Iraqi babies, right? And so...
well, now Chang's going to be president, and the joke's on you. And I'm getting a pony.
So anyway, you're familiar with that Oslo Freedom Forum garbage, right?
Yeah, and it's a safe bet, Jimmy, that it's a front for somebody else shady, some sort of intelligence service. These things are never what they appear on the surface. It's a front group for something else. That's why they always promote Western intelligence narratives. They'll call for the freedom of anybody who is convenient for Western foreign policy goals. They'll never call for the freedom of Gaza, for example, of Palestinians, because they're unworthy victims, to use the term from Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman.
Well, and I would doubt that video that I did is still up on the Young Turks channel, because they are always pro-war. They smeared you and said you were taking money from Russia when you were telling the truth about the Syrian war, just like we were at this channel, right? That's what started that whole kerfuffle where Kyle Kalinske almost lost all his, did lose most of his audience because he's sided with the wrong people on that. But
wait, you remember when Roe v. Wade got overturned finally, and that was, they kept stringing people along about protecting it or getting rid of it because it was a thing for both parties to run on, right? There ain't no better one than Israel-Palestine, and Ukraine was a big failure. So that means the pyramid scheme's collapsing. There's nothing more reliable of an emotional mind control button than hitting that Israel versus Palestine. Then you cause all kinds of genocide and murder, and you get more terrorists. Then we're going to be able to keep the business going. The whole thing's going to keep going. They'll get that gas up through from Gaza all the way to Europe, because Germany's screwed now.
Yes, Germany
blew up their pipeline.
They blew up their pipeline. They're paying 4 times the amount for their energy than they were before we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
Did you see I couldn't believe it, Saga Crystal, because the new guy who's been prosecuted, the Ukrainian colonel who's supposedly behind the whole thing, Ukraine brought him to justice.
It's so funny.
Crystal and Saga both believe it.
Yeah.
They both believe it. They were like, hey, it was crazy. They said Russia did it, but it was this guy. Not America, obviously.
You're
a guy who's already facing charges. He's already facing charges anyway. So I think they figured he'd be a perfect fall guy.
Yeah.
Because he's already facing charges for something else. So they made him the fall guy. And going with the story that this was a 6-person operation on a little rented sailboat. It's such a joke.
You're telling me that Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, who works for the Hudson Institute, just repeated CIA and establishment State Department talking points?
Not just that. He goes, yeah, there's a story Biden supposedly said he was going to do. He did like a little dismissive thing of the very, very powerful evidence, I think, of Biden saying, we are going to do that we played on the show many times. He dismissed like it's some wacky
Biden
thing.
said we will end it. There will not be a Nord Stream pipeline.
And then after it happened, Tony Blinken said this is a tremendous strategic opportunity. And Victoria Nuland said, we're very gratified that the Nord Stream pipeline is now a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. But yeah, what's so funny about this new cover story that they put out via the Washington Post is the Washington Post, in talking about this, says that the Nord Stream attack drew objections from U.S. officials. So the Washington Post to launder this new cover story that the CIA came up with to blame some poor Ukrainian guy, the Washington Post had to pretend that Joe Biden didn't promise to destroy this thing, and that Anthony Blinken and Victoria Nuland didn't celebrate it after the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up.
So now, do you think that the establishment has to actually do something like pay people like Crystal and Sagar to tell those kind of lies and act that they're dumb? Or do you think that they're just willing to go along because they want to hang out with Democrats? Or I don't know what Sagar claims to be a right winger, but most
you don't want to be out in your social circle.
But still, the social circle that he's in is pro-Ukraine war. Right, and he can't tell the truth about it.
They got attacked for a little bit of truth. They got attacked for a little bit. I actually do believe this. They're like all these people. Jon Stewart got drilled with stuff because he told the truth for 5 seconds.
5 seconds about where the virus came from.
The minor amount of stuff they said way later than we said.
Yeah,
they got attacked. So I bet they don't get any other than their funding that runs their anti-corporate.
What's your theory, actual journalist Aaron Maté, on why the Crystal and Sagar did
Why is Kyle's hair blonde? If you could tie that into it too.
That's a.
I'm not talking about them because I haven't seen what they said, and so I don't want to comment on anything that they said. But I'll say in general, and we've talked about this. There's incentives to drink the Kool-Aid. Look at Russiagate, the dumbest thing of all time. The few of us, you and me, Jimmy, who pushed back against it, we were smeared. And when that happens, that sends a message to everybody who wants to advance in media that if you don't drink the Kool-Aid, if you ask the wrong questions, if you say the wrong things, you'll be marginalized. You'll be, not get a platform. And so that creates incentive for people who are driven by careerism first and not by integrity to go along. And we've seen that same thing with the Ukraine proxy war. How many people are still supporting this disastrous Ukraine proxy war now that it's going so badly? At the same thing. We opposed it from the start, even before it began. And yet only now there's a whole bunch of people now that the U.S. is walking away from Zelensky because he's delusional and he's losing and he has no more value to Western proxy warriors. Now you're going to see people starting to pretend as if they were critical of this thing from the start. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with Russiagate too. Happens every single time. And that's how it works.
I mean, that's what Julian Assange is there for. Julian Assange is there as an example to scare the shit out of any other reporter who wants to expose war crimes or even go against the establishment. Wouldn't you agree that's really what he's there for?
100%, of course. And we got to free him because he's being targeted for exposing actual crimes. He's the biggest example of that. Someone who's vilified by so many members of the media because he does the job that they won't do.
Hey, come see us doing a live stand-up show. We'll be in Burbank, California, Oxnard, California, Venice, California, Palmdale, California. Then we're going to Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, and Boston, Massachusetts. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.